A wealthy man left his wife with nothing, and she had to work as a delivery driver, taking her daughter with her. Then, one day, she overheard a strange conversation between three men. In a life of luxury and security, Alice thought she had it all. But when an unexpected divorce leaves her destitute, she faces a world of challenges and betrayals. With her daughter Emily by her side, Alice fights to rebuild her life, only to uncover dark secrets about her ex-husband. As Richard's fate becomes entangled with dangerous conspiracies, Alice finds herself in a moral dilemma that could change everything. Alice always imagined she had a perfect life with Richard. He was a successful and charismatic businessman, and she felt privileged to be able to dedicate her time to their family and the luxurious home they shared. Her daughter, Emily, was the light of her life, and Alice spent her days caring for her and maintaining their home, believing that the love and stability they had built were immune to any storm. However, her perfect reality crumbled when Richard came home one day and, without preamble, announced, "I want a divorce." The coldness with which Richard made the announcement left Alice stunned. What do you mean, divorce? What happened?" she asked, trying to process what she had just heard. Richard sighed, as if bored. "Alice, it's just not working anymore. I need something different. I'm tired of this life," he replied, avoiding her gaze. Alice felt a lump in her throat. How could he be tired? What about the love, the commitment, the family they had built together? The situation became even more devastating when Alice met with Richard's lawyers. They were ruthless, and it was clear that Richard wanted to leave Alice with nothing. "The house, the cars, the bank accounts, all of it will go to Richard," one of the lawyers said without a shred of empathy. Alice could hardly believe what she was hearing. "This is ridiculous. I dedicated my life to this marriage. And Emily? What about her?" she protested, but her pleas were ignored. The alimony offered was paltry, barely enough to cover basic expenses. The following days were a whirlwind of emotions. Alice had to deal with the shock of Richard's betrayal and the concern for Emily's future. The house, once a sanctuary of safety, was now a constant reminder of what she had lost. Every corner held a memory, an echo of happy moments that now seemed like ghosts of a life gone by. The pain of leaving everything behind was exacerbated when she had to explain the situation to Emily. "Sweetie, we're going to move to a new place," she said, trying to sound cheerful. "And Daddy? Isn't he coming?" Emily asked innocently. "No, my love. It's just going to be us for a while," Alice replied, struggling to hold back her tears. Determined to move forward, Alice began looking for a job. Reality hit hard. After years out of the workforce, her skills were outdated. The rejections piled up, and with each no, hope dwindled. Finally, she managed to get a job as a delivery driver for a small logistics company. "It's a start," she thought, trying to console herself. The work was exhausting, and the conditions were harsh, but it was all she had. Every day, Alice put on a brave face for Emily, trying not to let the exhaustion and frustration show. Alice's new routine as a delivery driver was a mix of challenges and humiliations. She drove for hours, often getting lost in unfamiliar neighborhoods, trying to make deliveries on time. Each delivery was a battle against the clock, against traffic, and sometimes against the bad moods of customers. "Why did it take so long?" "I ordered this days ago," complained one customer as Alice handed over a package. She just lowered her head, mumbling apologies, while shame burned in her chest. Emily, with no other childcare options, accompanied her mother on the deliveries. The little girl, always curious and full of life, found it interesting to see so many different houses. "Mommy, look at that garden. It has flowers of every color," Emily exclaimed, pointing to a house with a lush garden. These moments of Emily's joy were what kept Alice going. "Yes, dear, they are beautiful. Let's see if we can find more pretty flowers along the way," she replied, trying to keep the tone light. However, having Emily with her at work was a constant worry for Alice. She had to ensure her daughter's safety while completing her tasks, which was especially challenging in less safe areas or during adverse weather conditions. On a particularly difficult day, Alice received an urgent delivery for a distant and little-known neighborhood. The weather was turning, and she feared an imminent storm. Along the way, the van started making strange noises. Please, not now, she thought, her heart racing. The van suddenly stopped, leaving them stranded on a deserted road. Emily began to cry, frightened by the situation. It's okay, sweetheart. Everything will be fine, Alice said, trying to stay calm. With no cell signal to call for help, desperation began to set in. They waited for hours until finally, a truck driver stopped to help. Are you ladies okay? Do you need a ride or something? The man asked, with a concerned look. I think the van broke down. Can you take a look? Alice asked, her voice trembling. The man made a temporary fix, enough for them to get home. Back at the small apartment, Alice felt the weight of her new reality like never before. She was exhausted, both physically and emotionally. Sitting on the couch, she watched Emily play with her few toys, feeling a tightness in her chest. I need to be strong for her, she thought, as silent tears streamed down her face. Every night, she reviewed the tight budget, trying to find a way to stretch every penny. Even amid so many difficulties, there was a small spark of hope. I'll give Emily a better life, somehow, she promised herself. On an otherwise ordinary day, Alice received a delivery route for an upscale neighborhood. The streets were lined with imposing mansions and meticulously maintained gardens. Upon arriving at one of the houses to deliver a package, Alice left Emily in the van with the window slightly open, as usual. As she prepared to leave, she noticed 3 men near the mansion's gate. They were dressed in suits and sunglasses and seemed to be engaged in a serious conversation. Alice tried not to pay attention, but when she heard one of them mention Richard's name, her senses went on high alert. That son of a bitch Richard is going to pay. He doesn't know who he's messing with, one of the men said with barely contained anger. Another replied, yes, he deceived us. We're going to settle this once and for all. Alice's heart began to race. She pretended to arrange something in the van, trying to hear more of the conversation. It's not just about the money. It's a matter of honor, continued a third man, which made Alice even more worried. With the package in hand, Alice quickly walked to the mansion's door, trying to act normal. Her maternal instinct screamed to get Emily out of there as quickly as possible. She delivered the package and, when she returned to the van, found Emily drawing in her notebook. Mommy, I drew us in our new house, Emily said, smiling. That's beautiful, dear. But we need to go now, Alice said, trying to hide the urgency in her voice. As she drove, Alice couldn't stop thinking about the conversation she overheard. The mention of Richard and the implied threat in those words left her nervous. Even with all the resentment she felt toward him, the thought of something serious happening to Richard disturbed her. He might be an idiot, but he's still Emily's father, she thought, biting her lower lip. What should she do with this information? The doubt gnawed at her. Alice knew she had to do something, but she didn't know what. If I tell someone, who will believe me? And if I do nothing and something horrible happens? She wondered, feeling the weight of responsibility. The situation was complicated, and the idea of involving the police scared her. What if it puts me in trouble? What if Richard finds out? She pondered, feeling trapped in a moral dilemma. That night, Alice decided she needed a second opinion. She called Sarah, her best friend since school days. Sarah had always been a practical and sensible person, someone Alice knew she could trust. They met at a modest cafe, and Alice recounted the entire story, including the conversation she overheard and her worries. Sarah listened attentively, not interrupting as Alice poured out her anxieties and fears. So, what do you think I should do? Alice asked, desperate for guidance. Sarah took a sip of her coffee, thoughtful. Look, Alice, I understand your concern, but you need to think about yourself and Emily first. Richard left you with nothing. Do you really want to risk your safety, or even Emily's, to help someone who treated you so badly? Sarah said, her voice soft but firm. Alice sighed, feeling the weight of Sarah's words. She knew her friend was right in many ways. But what if something really bad happens to him? What if he gets hurt or worse? How will I feel knowing I could have done something? Alice countered, looking at her teacup as if it held the answer to all her problems. Sarah leaned forward, a serious look on her face. You've always been a good-hearted person, Alice. But sometimes we have to think about ourselves and our children. Maybe the best thing to do is to report it to the police anonymously. That way, you do your part, but you don't expose yourself directly, Sarah suggested, trying to find a solution that would ease Alice's conscience. The idea of talking to the police frightened Alice. What if no one believes me? What if it gets me into more trouble? She asked, her voice trembling. Sarah took her hand and squeezed it, offering silent comfort. You have to do what you think is right, but you also need to protect yourself. Think about it, Sarah said, trying to be as supportive as possible. Alice nodded, still uncertain. The conversation continued, with Sarah trying to help Alice see all angles of the situation. Back at the apartment, Alice was more confused than ever. She looked at Emily, who was innocently playing on the carpet, unaware of her mother's emotional turmoil. I need to make the right decision for her, Alice thought, feeling overwhelming pressure. That night, she had nightmares about the possible consequences of her actions or inaction. In one of the dreams, she saw Richard hurt, while Emily cried, asking why her mother didn't do anything to help. She woke up sweating with a sense of urgency, knowing she needed to act soon. While Alice wrestled with her doubts and dilemmas, elsewhere in the city, Ethan, the son of the owner of the company where Richard worked, was uncovering a corruption scheme. Ethan was a brilliant and dedicated young man with a strong work ethic. He had taken on an important role in his father's company and had noticed discrepancies in the financial reports. Intrigued and concerned, he decided to investigate further. Upon meticulously reviewing the documents, he found evidence that Richard was embezzling large sums of money. Ethan couldn't believe what he was discovering. Richard, who had always been seen as a loyal and competent employee, was using offshore accounts and shell companies to steal from the company. Ethan began to gather all the evidence he could find. He discreetly installed recording devices in Richard's office, hoping to capture some confession or incriminating conversation. His patience was rewarded when he managed to record a phone call in which Richard openly discussed his embezzlement plans and his intent to flee. With irrefutable evidence in hand, Ethan knew it was time to act. He contacted the authorities and handed over all the evidence. My father trusted him. How could he betray us like this? Ethan said to one of the officers, still stunned by the betrayal. A police operation was organized to arrest Richard before he could flee the country. Ethan felt a mix of relief and sadness. Relief at being able to expose the truth and protect his family's company, and sadness at discovering the level of dishonesty in someone they trusted. Meanwhile, Alice was still mired in her uncertainties. She finally decided to report what she had heard to the police, but before she could make the call, she saw the news on television. Local businessman arrested for fraud and embezzlement. The images showed Richard being led away in handcuffs, and Alice was stunned. She sat down, incredulous, as the reporters detailed the crimes and the investigation. He really did this? She murmured to herself, trying to absorb the magnitude of the situation. Ethan, trying to piece together the puzzle, decided to contact Alice. He learned that she might have overheard something relevant to the investigation and wanted to know more. When he called, Alice was surprised but agreed to meet him. They met at a cafe, and Ethan explained the entire situation. I didn't know Richard was doing this, but I heard something that might be related, Alice confessed, explaining the conversation she had overheard between the men at the mansion. On the morning of the final confrontation, the police, along with Ethan and other company representatives, arrived at Richard's office. They were ready to arrest him and seize all relevant documents. Richard, caught off guard, tried to maintain his composure. What's going on? This is a mistake, he exclaimed as the police handcuffed him. But when the recordings were played, he was speechless. There was no denying the crimes. Richard's arrest was a shock to the community. He had always been seen as a respectable and charismatic businessman. The revelation of his illicit activities shook not only the company but also the public image he had built over the years. In the following days, the media was in a frenzy, covering every detail of the case. For Alice, it was a whirlwind of emotions. He deserves this, but he's still Emily's father, she thought, trying to reconcile her conflicting feelings. Ethan continued to support Alice during this tumultuous time. He thanked her for any indirect help she may have given by alerting someone about the possible conspiracy. "You did the right thing by speaking up about what you heard. It helped complete the picture and ensure that Richard didn't escape," he said, with genuine gratitude. Additionally, the company made sure that all of Richard's victims, including Alice, were compensated financially. This allowed Alice and Emily to have a more comfortable and stable life. Over time, the relationship between Ethan and Alice blossomed in an unexpected way. They began spending more time together, first discussing the events and then simply enjoying each other's company. Ethan admired Alice's strength and resilience, while she found in him a kind and understanding companion. During a walk in the park, Ethan held Alice's hand and said, "You've been through so much, but you've never lost your kindness. I admire that in you." Alice smiled, feeling valued in a way she hadn't in a long time. Richard was convicted of his crimes, losing all his assets and receiving a long prison sentence. The news brought a sense of justice to many, but for Alice, it was a reminder of life's complexity. She knew she had to explain everything to Emily, but also that this was an opportunity to start anew. With Ethan's support, Alice managed to find a new home and began building a new life, full of promises and hope. Despite the difficulties and uncertainties, Alice and Emily were ready for a fresh start. The journey had been arduous, but they emerged stronger and closer. And with Ethan by their side, the future looked brighter than ever.